Welcome to the Music for the Soul podcast, where we talk honestly about difficult things. This is a place where music, hope, and healing come together. I'm Becky Nordquist.
And I'm Steve Seiler. Thanks so much for joining us. We are so delighted today to have with us Jim Cress. Jim is a Christian counselor, author, a podcast host, and really so much more. Jim, thank you for being with us.
Oh, Steve and Becky, my pleasure. Love hanging out with you all.
Thank you.
We're sure glad to have you here today.
I was thinking, Jim, I guess it was Michael Cusick who introduced us way back, I don't know, sometime around 2005, 6, 7, 8.
You know, it either was Michael, who we both know well, or I think I came across you through my work for 7 years at Bethesda Workshops in Nashville, where we played, somebody's daughter all the time. And I knew of you there. Then I think it was later through Michael. But nonetheless, I feel like I've been around you forever at various conferences, et cetera.
Well, let's just begin by letting our listeners know how you got into counseling.
Well, boy, that's a very broad question. I don't mind answering. The true question about got into counseling as such is I was going through Dallas Seminary. I was a minister to young married adults at Irving Bible Church.
Okay.
Church that Chuck Swindoll had pastored before. And I went to the head, Steve Shores, he was the head of the counseling program at Dallas Seminary, and said, man, I've got people coming in, young couples, and I was a young couple coming in with all these problems. I don't know what to do. And he said, one of the best things you can do, I'm not in a counseling program at that time. He said, one of the best things you can do is go put yourself in counseling. And I said, oh, good. Yeah, because I can learn techniques. And he said, well, no, so you can work on yourself. And that started us off with a man who had trained under Dan Allender and Larry Crabb. And my wife and I spent 8 years with them. So we got into counseling. I learned, quite frankly, pretty quickly that this was about me. He started talking about my dad and his father issues. And I literally got mad. Really mad. I'm here to talk about this, not that, not my dad. And, but 8 years, we never missed a week. Men's therapy group and all that. Was hosting a national radio show called the Minrith Meyer Clinic that lives on in the iteration of New Life Live right now. And so I'm interviewing therapists. I was there 8 years and getting a virtual education. And then after my master's at Dallas Seminary, I thought, I think I'd like to really do this. So I went to Colorado Christian University, studied under Larry Crabb and became a counselor, traveled with Larry for a number of years, and then got licensed. And that's how I got into the counseling world, was doing my own work.
Wow, that's quite a journey.
That is, and a lot of really good names there that have certainly poured into the Christian community as far as growing awareness and an openness to counseling and therapy for believers. And I know I've been blessed by a lot of Larry Crabb's things too. So, wow, that's quite a journey.
You already referenced Bethesda, so I wonder if you would share with our listeners the personal part of that story.
Yeah, I'd be glad to. Thank you. I had what we would call, many of us call, recovery. I stand here today as a grateful, recovering pornography and sex addict. I'm not ashamed about that at all. And I was 2 years, what we would call sober, not acting out, and came across I do a lot of work, as you know, Steve, especially for the American Association of Christian Counselors, and met Marnie Faree. She actually heard me speak at a conference and came and said, look, we have some transitions in staffing. Would you be interested in coming on board? And I'm like, well, I'm in recovery for a couple of years. And so I did. And the rest of that became history. And I learned, oh my word, so much with Marnie's graciousness and boots on the ground and training. So I say this to a lot of people. One of the early things Bethesda Workshops did for me was some integrity in me, right? Was I'm not going to be leading men in bondage to get through, like one of my favorite songs from you is Free, to get free and be lying behind the scenes and fake and not in integrity. So it really helped. I found a lot of guys said the same thing. If you're trying to work and help those, not a guarantee, but often can be a great deterrent to ever slipping or going back. And out of that, discovered Patrick Carnes and became a certified sex addiction therapist at CSAT And it really just solidified my own recovery. I got a virtual PhD in treating sex addiction through Marnie Free, and then mentored by Mark Laser. He's in heaven now, but and he had been connected with Bethesda. So Bethesda's changed my life. Grateful
Praise
for
God.
that whole program. Yeah.
Can you share a little bit about how you have used the songs you've already referenced, Somebody's Daughter and Free, in your own
Yeah.
counseling practice?
And other of your albums, you remember at 2 or 3 AACC World Conferences, I bought your whole library.
Thank
Just
you, by the way.
amazing stuff. Yeah. Well, my pleasure. And I've had you stand up when I speak, and because I really believe in what, music's a language of the emotions. You don't have to be a Dove winning or Grammy Award winning for many I've worked with, songwriter, musician, all that. It's the language of the soul, the language of the emotions. And so it'll guide clients, people I work with, in ways that just talk therapy won't. So at Bethesda, we always played 3 songs, and in my years there, kind of emceed a lot of it, as we'd have a group of men, then wives, we call partners now, and then couples, just to give them the perspective of somebody's daughter, and to play that song and get them out. When a guy is acting out to pornography or an infidelity, he doesn't just objectify the person he's acting out to, like porn. He objectifies himself first. He has to turn himself pretty much into an object. And so to unobjectify, look, that's somebody's daughter, someone's precious child. I mean, I watched that just stun a group of guys. Every now and then, maybe a guy had some narcissism or something, he would just tune out during the song, but guys begin to get in touch with their emotions. Then, boy, I tell you, you'd absolutely stun a room to play Is It Me? And we would play that when we began to say, fellas, we want to help you experientially understand more about the impact of what your acting out's done on your wife. And that middle section where, as you know well, and how you recorded it, where the wife begins to scream, how could you do this to me? And always have the vision, only God can save us, to move into that. Mm-hmm. And then we would end every workshop, and there would never be probably a better song, take communion, and we would end with the song Free. That was kind of a beginning, middle, and end to help guys get in touch with things, and in ways that possibly just word-based counseling, meaning the spoken word, narrative voice counseling, wouldn't do.
You can't imagine what a blessing it is to hear you share about that.
Yeah, it's true.
The song Is It Me? The recording process for that was absolutely stunning. I actually sat and prayed with Shelley, who sang the song, before she went in and did the screaming part you referred to. Mm-hmm. And guys were looking for exits that weren't there.
Oh, clear a room with that.
Yeah. I mean, how big, I remember the guitar player there, how big his eyes got when she started. We had her scream out of we panned it so that she's screaming out of the left side of the speaker and whispering, I need you to hold me, out of the right side of the speaker, because we wanted to represent that duality. And I actually had women reach out and say, I thought I was insane. I thought I was crazy. And I heard this song and now I feel normal.
Yeah, so good.
Now that you're touching on a pretty raw nerve in my own life here, my husband, we just were having this conversation last night. He had 25 years of a serious porn addiction, and we've walked the road of relapse. And that song in particular, it just touches such a sensitive place in me. And I know that we have listeners sitting there right now saying, okay, I know in my head that really this kind of stems from a broken place in him. And yet there is so much broken in me right now. To move from that place to really be able to understand that it really isn't you is a difficult thing for a woman. What types of words of encouragement could you give, or how would you encourage a woman that is sitting there going, I know that it isn't me, but yet it feels like it's completely me? Does that make sense?
Oh, well, thank you. Because that whole part of what you've described, Becky, what I do with women is start at ground zero with them. I literally have, in my office where I am right now, a red hard hat that came when I went with a group of therapists after the towers went down in 2001. And what are we doing? We walked around and it was very somber, and will they rebuild? And we don't know. I use that here because that's where it came from, is to go to ground zero and with a partner, a wife, a woman, single or not, she's been betrayed, and said, where is your ground zero? And instead of saying, no, don't say, is it me? I want to use that contemplatively and say, you ever thought about that? And it's like 100% yes. Let's talk about, if it's hysterical, it's historical often, meaning like in her family of origin, naming, not blaming. Where were you ever blamed before? Instead of just saying it wasn't you, is like literally let that song play out and say, so tell me more. 3 great words I use a lot in relationships is tell me more. Yeah, I believe it is me, and maybe there was something I could do. Our field, by the way, used to pathologize more women partners by saying you're a co-addict. We use that at Bethesda. We're not using it really anymore there, but you're a co-addict. Yeah, but you must have known. And thank God we've grown and changed to say don't pathologize a woman there and not call her a co-addict. And so it'd say, tell me more. Where did, and then they say, did you see signs? Well, I saw a history trail and thought he blamed it on somebody else. Or I saw something else and I saw a sign, as I've said often, that she might have smelled smoke and maybe she didn't do as much due diligence to see where the fire was. And that's okay. I say, okay, it's a new day going forward. Mm-hmm. Then as we walk through that I do a couple of things. I do what I call fact and impact. Fact, my friend sitting across from me, that happened to you. Impact is what did it do to you? For every wife, for every woman, the same sun that hardens clay softens butter. It's not like you want to say, well, I know exactly the book says this is, or the song says this is what happened. So the idea is to say, just let me draw her heart out more where she can say, but I've continued to blame myself. If she shames herself, I say that shame, SHAME, stands for self-hatred at my expense. That's what shame is. Self-hatred at my expense. I hate myself and it costs me a lot. And so blame is also, that's an attempt to discharge pain. So I help them sort through that and usually can get to the point where they organically say, I see that that was not my fault. I'm not responsible for what he did. I did not give him enough sex or not touch him in the right way or so-and-so or become his porn star, which many guys have wanted, and she doesn't own any of his, I'm going to use a word here, she doesn't own any of his sin or any of his addiction. But it usually takes time versus saying, you stop that. It's not your fault. Is it me? Let's play the song. No, it's not you. I take time to let them get all that out and kind of get the pus out of the wound.
Let's take a moment and play a little bit of Is It Me?
I can't breathe. This can't be happening to me. Was everything we had just a lie? I believed while you deceived me, faithful while my love was being violated. Nothing is the same, nothing to hold on to. Where's the man I knew a day ago? Is it me? What did I do? Am I not enough for you? Is it me? Was I wrong? I believed our love was strong. Is it me?
Every woman longs to be found captivating. And that is usually at the crux, at least for me, it was like, wow, I just cannot captivate him enough to stay away from pornography and that addiction. And so to move from that place and recognizing his wound. And I just wondered if you could talk for a moment about the common wound in a man that turns to pornography.
Yeah, this is my thought about it, being a grateful recovering pornography addict myself and working with a lot of men, is there's a reality, is actually in a Jackie Chan movie that he had amnesia at the end of the movie. Near the end, he stood on a car with his hands raised high and said, who am I? Who am I? I just trying to figure out. we are looking for someone to tell us who we are. And at least in the pornography world, the women in pornography are there with our arms raised high saying, tell me, who am I? Guy may not think he's doing that, but he is. And they will say, you're the stud, you're this, I want you. It's often attachment based, we say in therapy, trying to soothe something inside of me. And hey, give a kid heroin at age 12 and then try to get him off of it at age 30. That's what we've done with porn, right? So it's an identity. Porn's never ultimately about sex. The pornography is not about sex or masturbation or looking. It's in there, but it is about an attachment or tell me who I am. Tell me that I'm enough, that I'm worthy. And so with that, if I've been doing all that, maybe I saw marriage as an attempted panacea or cure-all that, or guys have said, and it was in my story, I said it, I did, Steve and Becky, that maybe my wife would become my porn. Christian porn, of course, but I come there and she says, I'm not doing that, or I'm not doing this or whatever. And so I go inside and kind of like as a dog returns to its vomit, the scripture says, what I don't work out in my life, I'll act out. So I will go, my wife's never supposed to be enough to cure all that ails me. As Blaise Pascal, the philosopher, said, all of men's problems stem from the inability to sit alone with himself quietly in a room. So I'm reaching out for something like heal me, be here for me, calm me down, even neurochemically calm me down. And no wife, no girlfriend, no woman's ever supposed to be enough to do that.
I heard the scripture, be still and know that I am God, when you were speaking about that, Jim. There's not a lot of stillness in our culture these days.
That's true.
And if we want to hear the voice of Jesus, we have to commit to making space for it.
You know what I like about that, since you brought that up real quick, Steve? One commentator or one expositor put it this way, and Eugene Peterson comes right close to this in the message. Look at the whole chapter in Psalm 46, and in Psalm 46:10, be still and know that I'm God. It's talking about planning and scheming and war room. What do I do and all that. It's stop your warlike planning, sit still with yourself and with God and know that I am God. So a lot of guys are out there scheming and planning and thinking of what they want to do and what we call rituals as they move toward acting out, or preoccupation and fantasy, but also scheming and planning on the recovery side of they're not well connected in community. They're not done a disclosure, which is a whole other story. And so they're hiding, and we stay as sick as our secrets. So they're planning and scheming of ways that I'll be able to manage it here. And it's like whack-a-mole. They whack this down and then two more pop here and they get food under control. And this pops up, and it's like, it's the one, porn's the one for many guys, the one addiction, as we're in the middle of a porn-demic, literally worldwide right now. It's the one addiction that goes back to probably the earliest in our lives. Sigmund Freud, we can use him for a minute, said the original addiction is to lust and or masturbation, is what he would call it. All other addictions that follow are nothing but mere substitutions for the original. Because early, they have videos in utero of little babies touching themselves because, hey, wait, it feels good. And then it gets pathological, and the drug dealer for the sex addict, the porn addict, lives where? Inside himself. It's accessible, anonymous, affordable, airbrushed, and accelerated, man. It's serious business.
And it is a business making billions of dollars, right?
Yeah, you know that.
And causing a lot of long-term damage as well. Do you have a moment to speak to, maybe there's someone listening that thinks, oh, this isn't really hurting anyone. And I know that my husband would testify to the fact that he had no idea how much he was damaging his own mind and his own brain and like future into marriage and how it affects you later for marriage and that in the ultimate intimate relationship, humanly speaking.
Yeah, well, and Becky, it's a great question. I think it seems that the kind of court of public opinion, maybe just in the Christian world at least, would be, it's really hurting women. I mean, don't you know that's somebody's daughter? And it's like, you went where my mind goes is how it harms himself. There's only one pleasure center in the body, in the brain. It's the nucleus accumbens of the brain. And you're firing dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, adrenaline, catecholamines, PEA, all these neurochemicals, so that every porn addict, sex addict, is a drug addict. And so what I'm doing is those neurons and all that neurochemistry that fire together, wire together. And I'm telling you, it's just like what it's doing, taking me down a path. Usually we have, as you know, around drug addiction, what we call tolerance, that a pastor looks at me, true, crying years ago and says, I was in pornography. I knew it was bad. When I woke up, in quotes, outside a teenage girl in my church, outside her bathroom, trying to peer in, and I, woke up. I didn't see her. And I thought, what am I doing? How did I get here? And he left and wasn't adjudicated for it because he didn't see anything. But he said, I never would have predicted I would have gone that far. Some guys won't. They can just be on this level of porn, but usually there's tolerance. So what it does in wiring, plus the objectification of the intimacy disorder of it, to just keep putting me further and further away of ever being able to, in a healthy way, attach to my girlfriend, woman, or wife. It will be very, very hard because, again, I am objectifying myself. We're objects. That doesn't speak of Psalm 8. We're crowned with glory and honor.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just an object. Because I'm also somebody's son.
Right.
It's me, right? I know you guys know that. It's like,
and you're demeaning yourself and your own divinity that's in you.
Right.
So ultimately, it almost sounds like it's a serious struggle with identity at the end of the day.
Very much. And that
And
is,
dealing
back,
with
Jackie,
painful.
who am I? I land there all the time, Becky, of just going, to your identity and getting that vertical piece straight so that I'm not going in my office where I sit now, cut off pieces of garden hose and I hand it to a guy. I do like I do at the work at Onsite Workshops. We do a lot of experiential work, and I'll have him hold it. It looks like an umbilical cord. I go, you're going around saying, fill me up. Imagine just going around with a severed end of umbilical cord. Porn is very faithful. It will fill you up for the moment. It works, or it wouldn't work. It works. So he's going around, then he turns to his wife. Tell me who I am. Who's my identity? And if there's a chance that we view God as a heavenly version of our earthly father, we're in trouble to go to God and say, why would I go there? Or as our friend Paul Young said in the shack, he had to keep unmasking the daylights out of God, just unmasking God before he would give God his face. So sometimes I go to God, why would I go there? God is not safe.
Yes, concept of self and the concept of God. We've talked about it a lot on the podcast here, and definitely what you're just reiterating again is that those visions that we carry, we have to be solidly planted in the truth about those things and pulling that apart and so forth.
Hey, Becky, I know that you have been reading a book that Jim did a lot of writing in. I think you probably would like to mention that to him and ask a few questions about that.
I just devoured Good Boundaries and Goodbyes, and I have so many friends in the process of that, and I'm excited to lead a group coming up going through that together. And I just, first of all, have to say thank you so much on behalf of us everywhere. My husband is now reading it. I know it's geared more, but he is a guy that loves to read and grow, and we are processing through so many things. But there's so much in the book that your contribution is so very helpful. And I know that there were several questions that I asked of people who are currently reading, like, what would you ask the therapist, if you had a moment with his ear? So one of them is, they asked, can you share with us about the differences between emotionally difficult versus emotionally destructive relationships, especially as it pertains to addiction?
Would love to, with big hat tip to my good friend, Dr. Leslie Vernick, who me, Leslie, Joel Motomale, and Leslie and Lisa Turkhurst are doing. We got another one coming up in a week. We're bringing about 50 women into a place called Haven Place here in Charlotte, where I am. We do basically good boundaries and goodbyes, and experientially look at where they are in their questions. Leslie does a powerful teaching. It's a name everyone in your podcast audience needs to know, Leslie Vernick. So there are difficult marriages, which I don't know one that isn't. It's out there somewhere, sure enough. But the destructive marriage is where it moves from just a normal, I say to people in my teaching in marriage, we know this, even as an ordained pastor, I've married people, the two become one, but the one are still two. I say the two become one, but the one are still two. You're you, I'm not you, even in a marriage. So there's difficulties. Dr. John Gottman, lead marital researcher, said there's often 5 disagreements in a marriage you'll never solve. Pornography is not one of them. Infidelity is not one of them. So to look at things are difficult, or like getting in recovery. That can be a classic one. If you want me to go there on a literal level, would be it's difficult to be in recovery. 2 to 5 years for a guy to probably get some substantial recovery, and a lot longer for his wife to just keep rebuilding trust. Trust is rebuilt right over time, plus provable, reliable experience. So then you have that to go to destructive is what happens if there's only 3 ways he lies, L-O-G, log, for me, I spell it, either lies, looking right at you, O, he omits, don't ask, don't tell policy, you didn't ask, or G, he gaslights. So destructive marriage would be check yourself, person listening today to this podcast. Does it feel like it's harming you, including back into your own life story or trauma story? Is gaslighting going on? Is this the 4th or 5th time he said, I'm sorry, I slipped again? We know a lot of guys in porn recovery, it's not a slip. They call it a slip. It's actually a full relapse pretty quick. So that part is the destructive. Is there verbal and emotional abuse going on? One of Dr. Leslie Vernick's great teachings and strengths and books. So the idea is there something, is there passive aggressive type language going on, trying to excuse the language, but mind molest you to really say, is it me? Yeah, kind of was you. I like that song. You kind of deserve it. You kind of brought, and you give me more sex. So the verbal and emotional abuse, or stonewalling that goes on, and someone playing mind games with you, or I think, and I don't think you mind me saying this, the one I get so much of is, you don't have biblical grounds to divorce me. And that can come in where you so what, you should forgive 70 times 7 and basically really enable a guy to continue to acting out. I think if a woman, in this case, takes an inventory, she'll know, does it feel destructive to her? Share with a therapist or a couple of good girlfriends. Here's what's really going on. See if he's mad about you going to a couple of girlfriends and telling your marital relationship narrative. And most women, I think, can tell. They do with me. They go, yeah, and I mirror it back. Does that feel destructive to you? It kind of does. That's different than difficult.
So good. So let me ask you this. Is it possible to remain married and cohabitating when one or both partners is committed to healing their emotional destructive relating?
That's going to vary, Becky. For me, is the nuance of every individual couple. I find it's a pretty easy little test, which is, can you stay out of therapy land and therapy talk and its own destruction, both wives to husbands, husbands to wives, or if they're pre-married in a relationship, which is we get in something and somebody goes out and they use one of the 4 horsemen of marital apocalypse, right? They either do criticism, I'm critically cutting you down. This is from Dr. Gottman. Secondly, they're defensive. Oh, really? You bring that up? Quid pro quo, Clarice. I'll bring this right back to you. They use contempt, which is shame. I'm literally condemning you. Maybe I'm really creative in how I condemn you. And or the last one is stonewalling. That's not a healthy boundary. That's I'm shutting you out and basically ghosting you. So I think I tell clients I work with all the time, well, how did it work? They go into an in-house separation. Well, he's still touching me and I don't want that to happen. Or he's using, like I did to my wife, spiritual abuse by using Bible verses against, or I say, I don't have it to give to talk about this. And he's violating my boundaries, even of space in the house. I find that a lot of people, after even porn, it's hard to stay even in the same domicile, the same house. Not impossible, but if you do, there better be very strict, clear boundaries. And watch, a boundary without a consequence is a mere suggestion. Consequence, am I punishing him? No. If you do this, then this is there. And I have support of other women over here, a therapist, that if you cross the boundary, not just the big ones, like if you act out to porn again or have an affair, I'm talking about, I've said the boundaries keep me safe and you pushed on them. You don't get to do that.
I loved what that was well represented in the book about, it's not just about self-protection, but you're also protecting, the possibility of healing and the possibility of what could be mended. And, you mentioned trust, and in the book, you also talk about how it's really impossible to rebuild trust that is continually being broken. And that was just incredibly helpful as well.
Everybody knows that, Becky, in their house. If you had the kitchen remodel, y'all ever had anything remodeled, you or Steve?
Oh my gosh, yes, we had 3 months of repairs after a flood we had.
It was
we
promised.
renovated a 125-year-old farmhouse, so we've got it to the stud walls.
Hey, since I can say this because of 2010, I have before me, I keep over here a little transitional object. This is an audio broadcast, so you can't see it, but it says Gaylord Opryland Hotel, Nashville, Tennessee, because I've done a lot of healing work in that hotel for various reasons. November 2010, grand reopening. You know what was grand reopening? Because you know what happened before that, the Nashville flood.
Yep.
Well, if the Cumberland River continued to, they get things repaired. Remember the Grand Ole Opry House? I'm a big Grand Ole Opry fan. And it just kept flooding and ruined all the instruments. And so that's my metaphor. If you're doing a remodel and then it floods again, or they do a crappy job with the remodel and you have to tear it up and all like that, that's everybody knows that in a remodel or a rebuilding, it just gets destroyed again. You've damaged it again. Or heck, some people just, when you mop the floor, did mom ever say, don't walk on the floor till it's dry? So there's a level of recovery we haven't achieved. And oopsie poopsie, I slipped. No, you didn't. Maybe, but that's probably a relapse. You had 4 exit signs. I'm saying this gracious. You don't even sound like a preacher or bad. There are 4 exit signs that you should have called Steve or a buddy or Jimbo or a friend and said, man, I'm tempted. I don't think a guy hardly ever just slips. He's feeling the itch. He's feeling the thoughts, the triggers, and he's not checking them in somewhere. So that piece there is, if real recovery is going on, but if you try to get, some recovery going and then he slips and he snacks on it, he didn't really masturbate to it or whatever, all of that, especially for the wife or the partner, it's hard for them to get that stability and traction and safety. I want the wife or partner will be searching for safety. Imagine as you're listening, see my right hand. You can't see it, but see a right hand, say for the wife, she is searching for safety. Are you safe, sir? Husband, boyfriend, are you safe? He needs to be structuring safety, checking in with her and doing other things and having accountability. So that's where it is. And he has no accountability. He's just doing, the Lone Ranger stuff, or he doesn't want covenant eyes, or doesn't want to do any therapy around it, or he's getting resentments growing. Those are often check engine lights on the dashboard of their marriage saying, this is going to be hard to rebuild trust with this.
Mm. Grieving broken marriage vows is exhausting and difficult. Could you give those who are currently grieving infidelity and broken promises, perhaps some practical tools that would help them take some steps down the healing path?
I'd love to, Becky. Here's what I say. Got a lot of Jimisms. Sometimes they work. You'll see. If you don't grieve, the pain won't leave. Boundaries, it's in that book, Good Boundaries and Goodbyes. Boundaries, my teaching on it, boundaries require grief. Because you know what, dude? I put up these boundaries and say, if you go back to porn again, we'll separate for 6 months. If you have an affair again, I will divorce, or I will separate it whether you divorce or not. You put the consequence in. Boundaries require grief. So inside the grieving process, and I think it really, of course, takes time. See these guys, God bless them, where I deal with this a lot with fellas. And I say, dude, you got to be patient for a long time. It'll actually help your addict to not drive your bus. Because you brought it up again. Another pastor in Timbuktu or in Nashville or famous fell into sexual addiction. That not him. And she's triggered back, and the guy's mad. He's like, really? So I want him to walk, even the word of God, live with your wife in an understanding way according to knowledge. It's good for his recovery, but for a wife to get over here, not pathologize herself. I don't know how to say this different, y'all. She has to be careful also of getting into some groups. I believe some that are not leader-led. You can get into groups, and it's a blood fest in there. Mm-hmm. I saw that at Bethesda. We would have the containment for the women would come in and to sit there, and they just go. And then one woman says, my husband was sober 20 years, and he went down in flames. Again, don't trust. That's not good. She has to structure her own safety of who is like on her personal board of directors around her, encouraging her and speaking into her life. She'll have naysayers, like in the book of Nehemiah. They were called Sanballat and Tobiah, trying to mind molest them and get them. And you sure? she'll have the itty bitty pity committee inside of her too. She has to watch out with that, because I use other words at other times, but we're on a podcast. So, but that whole identity thing will come in, and it's a lot of, she has to really structure support around herself of who she's listening to and walking with.
I loved also in the book how you talk about having a bunch of little funerals. So often when we go through, it's easy to see that everything looks tainted, like there was nothing good. But separating that there were some good things, or there are some good things, and then grieving that out was incredibly beneficial.
And that takes, I love that, Becky, that takes time, because I call that revisionist history, and I want her to revise the history. And some women, my language, oh my gosh, I've been married to a Russian spy. That's what I call it. They look back and go, what the frig was real about any of this?
Right.
And I get that. But in time, or I should say, and in time rebuild over trust, plus provable, reliable experience. Plus our body, if you study trauma, if you're trauma informed, the brain begins to heal, right? As that happens, then the picture albums can come out, the family videos can come out, where 3 years ago she'd watch them and say, you friggin' liar, cheat, you did this, it's all deception. And she says, you know what? I see, my wife does this for me. It's not codependency. Don't let anybody tell you that. She has compassion on my severe attachment disorder stuff, my incredible crappy childhood, naming, not blaming. And then she on her own can get to the point and say, I see there was a lost little boy there. Like you were somebody's son, and you were lost. And part of you wanted to work recovery. You didn't know what to do. And you were an addict. You got started sexually abused. Jim Cress did sexually abused at age 4, introduced to porn by older boys at age like 11. And it goes, no wonder she sees that addiction part, can understand that. In time, she says, I forgive you. And I see the videos. I see you. You were a good dad in some ways back here, and you were a lost boy. That like Peter Pan, the lost boys. It just takes time. I don't think it's going to happen overnight.
Wow. Well, I know those of you who are listening are probably overwhelmed with the gold we've been hearing from Jim. Just beautiful, helpful, true, real information. And I know you're going to want to be able to get in touch with Jim and learn more. His website is jimcress.com. His email is jim@jimcress.com. On Instagram, it's @JimCress. And he also has the Therapy and Theology podcast where he's the co-host.
Hey, and Steve, can I say real quick, Jim Cress, forgive me if that's not self-promotion, but people spell it Crass, K, it's Cress. I've had a lifetime of people, hey, spell your name. And the Therapy and Theology podcast is in Apple's and all the platforms on Apple, but it's also on YouTube if you want to kind of sit and watch us, and me, Lisa, and Joel Budamale do our work. Some people are more video inclined that way. And we're getting ready to go back. We just did a great series, some time ago on women's issues, and it touches on, Becky, some of the things you were asking. And then we've got another series we're fixing to go in and record, and seems like it's making a difference. So I hope it is.
If you enjoyed the discussion today, please share it with a friend and give us a positive review on iTunes.
And please visit our website, musicforthesoul.org, where you can stream or download every song in our catalog, including the songs we mentioned today, Somebody's Daughter, Is It Me, and Free. Read our lyrics, our healing music guide, our blog posts, and much more. Thank you for listening. God bless.
I can't breathe. This can't be happening to me. Was everything we had just a lie? I believed while you deceived me, faithful while my love was being violated. Nothing is the same, nothing to hold on to. Where's the man I knew a day ago? Is it me? What did I do? Am I not enough for you? Is it me? Has it really come to this? Didn't what we have mean anything? You lied to me while you lay with me. What am I supposed to do with all these dreams you shattered?
How could you do this to me?
I'm sorry.
Don't touch me! Who's gonna comfort me now?
Who's gonna comfort me
Disgusting.
now? No, this isn't like it.
It's over between us.
I still love you.
I hate you! I hate that I need you!
Only God can save us. Only God can save us. Is it me?